Hey everyone, Midits here. A while ago, I released a video ranking every mainline Pokemon game from the Nintendo Switch era, and while I agree with what I stated, I could only go into so much detail when talking about 5 different games. So in today's video, I'll be discussing the first game to be released on the Switch, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and let's get straight into this. These games are set back in the Kanto region and act as a remake of Pokemon Yellow. There are numerous mechanics unique to this game that I wish to go over. First, your starter is fairly significant as it will be with you at all times, even if it's placed in your box. Either your Pikachu and Eevee can be used later on in the game as a replacement for HM Pokemon, which I always find a welcome addition since HMs have never brought anything positive. Another major feature is that, with some minor exceptions, there are no wild Pokemon battles. Instead, you must capture Pokemon in a similar method to Pokemon Go. While this is a neat concept, and it's fantastic seeing Pokemon games test out new things, this does make the game significantly easier. You can earn a ton of experience super quickly if you just get a streak of Pokemon while attempting to get the best multipliers. You of course can't avoid doing this, but the game is quite easy regardless of this. Pokemon now spawn both in the grass and in the overworld, which, while it is an excellent feature, it can sometimes lead to frame rate problems when there's too much on screen at once. One complaint I'll quickly get out of the way is the gyms. To enter some of the gyms, you need to complete a particular requirement. I don't mind most of these because it's either something you do in the main story or it's a really straightforward task. But with Koga, for some reason I will never comprehend, the game expects you to have 50 unique species of Pokemon in your Pokedex before confronting him. This just feels super unnecessary, especially comparing it to all the other gym leaders. Every in-game trade in these games is different compared to the older Kanto games, as you can now trade Kanto Pokemon for their Alolan forms, and it's a great feature from Sun Moon to see back. One more special mechanic that I want to bring up here is the return, and until the release of Legend ZA, the final appearance of Mega Evolution in the mainline Pokemon games. Since these games only have the original 151 Kanto Pokemon and the Meltan line, only the Kanto Megas make a return. You acquire the ability to Mega Evolve super late game, and even then you're only able to Mega Evolve the starters before the post game. I don't have a problem with this though, as we'll talk about later, there is a decent amount of stuff to do after you beat the main story. So the other Mega Evolutions can be put to good use. While many plot points are similar to the original games, there are quite a few differences to take note of. I've always found the story this game tells to be really bizarre. You play as a protagonist whose canon name is Chase or Elaine, depending on which gender you selected at the start of the game. You begin your journey along with your rival, canonically named Trace, and things seem like a traditional Kanto journey. That's until you meet Blue, who, despite Trace replacing him narratively in the story, also appears in this game. Speaking of Trace, he's easily one of the most boring rivals out of any Pokemon game. He's blue minus everything that makes Blue an entertaining character. One thing I will note that's interesting is that he catches a Cubone that's a child of the Ghost Marowak from the Pokemon Tower, but there's really not much else to say about him. One positive I'll give this game's story is that there are cutscenes with a couple of characters that weren't in the original games. On 2 separate occasions, you run into Misty and Brock again a while after battling them. Lorelei helps you during a surprise encounter with Team Rocket. While Jesse, James, and Meowth did appear in Pokemon Yellow, they have a lot more appearances here. Small stuff like this definitely adds to the game and helps make it feel like a more unique experience that you can't get out of Fire Red and Leaf Green, even if I still do prefer those games. Another thing I find peculiar about the story once again pertains to the protagonists of the original games. Blue appears to be a pretty well-known trainer who has connections to Elite Four, so you can safely assume that both Red and Blue have challenged the Elite Four at this point, and the events of the original games played out like they normally did. But for some reason, Giovanni is still the leader of Team Rocket. So don't even dare to try to think about how this story would make sense, because it's genuinely impossible. One character I feel is important to mention is Archer, a Team Rocket admin. That's because in the Johto games, Archer is the temporary leader of Team Rocket as they await Giovanni's return. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, there's an admin that people consider to be Archer, but it's great seeing him properly be here as an actual character involved with the story. These are the types of changes that remakes should be making, by adding new elements that couldn't have ever been part of the original game. You eventually become champion and beat the game, and this leads into the post game, which I find amazing. You're able to rebattle not only the Elite Four, but also the gym leaders with new teams. Blue replaces Giovanni just like he did in Gold and Silver. After catching Mewtwo, you can find him repeatedly battle Green, who makes her first appearance in a Pokemon game. In case you don't know, Green first appeared in a Pokemon strategy guide and later became a recurring character in the long-running Pokemon manga. And she's a follow a super fun character in the little that we see of her. One of the main things that you'll be doing in the post game is fighting the Master Trainers. Master Trainers are Pokemon trainers who only utilize one Pokemon. You have to face them with that same species. There are Master Trainer battles for nearly every single Pokemon in the entire game, including non-fully evolved Pokemon. After successfully defeating 6 Master Trainers, you get the proper final battle of the game. It's a battle we've seen quite a few times before, but it's great regardless. Red. One thing that I find very interesting is the starters Red, Blue, and Green have. You'd probably expect Red to have Charizard, Blue with Blastoise, and Green with Venusaur, but in this game, Red is Venusaur, Blue is Charizard, and Green is Blastoise. These are actually the starters the 3 of them had in the Pokemon Adventures manga, and it's honestly super cool seeing the manga get so much love from this game, because out of all the different media that Pokemon has, that is probably the one that gets the least talked about. Sword and Shield are targeted heavily for this, but technically these are the first mainline games that do not permit you to use every Pokemon. People weren't really that upset with this though, since everyone knew this was going to be a smaller game, and the first game of the newest generation would for sure have all the Pokemon. One thing I realized when it came to 3D Pokemon is that the games usually look a lot more polished when the camera is always at a fixed point rather than being movable, and that's something you really will notice the further you get into speaking about these games. Overall, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee put Pokemon's Time on the Switch off to a good beginning. There are obviously some kinks that need to be ironed out, and these games don't really compare to a lot of the other big franchise games that were already on the Switch, but as long as they learn from some of their mistakes and continue to innovate with the Pokemon formula, the next game should be incredible. So, the next game is Sword and Shield. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, check out some of my other content, and if you really enjoyed it, subscribe. That's it for now, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.